and good morning. Welcome to the Automation Bootcamp Introduction Day 1. Okay, so this is a 2-day course. We're going to do a couple hours today and a couple hours tomorrow. So hopefully you've registered for both. A little legal disclaimer. This content may contain forward-looking statements regarding future product plans and development efforts, blah, blah, blah. What that basically means is that if I show you something or if I talk about a roadmap item, you can't take that as a promise to deliver, only because product plans and priorities do change. I have to say it. Okay, so who am I? My name is Jason Murphy. I'm well, I haven't changed my title yet, but on the title screen it says I'm the Incentral Automation Nerd. That has now been given over to Paul Kelly, who has come on as the Incentral Automation Nerd, or the head nerd for Incentral. I'll be moving on. I was going to be the head nerd for efficiency, but I have decided to take a product manager role. So I will be replacing Chris Reed, if you're familiar with him. So a little bit of background on me. I've worked at Enable off and on for almost 10 years. I took a 3-year break and went to go work for a really, really big MSP. One of those CRN top 20 MSPs, the ones that make $100 million. So I went to do some cool stuff with them. But all in all, I have been focused on Incentral for at least the last 9+ years. Now, you probably have noticed I am fighting a little bit of a cold. Believe it or not, it's actually snowing here in Canada in April. People are losing their minds right now, only because we've been dealing with this for about 6 months. So I do apologize if I'm a little raspy or if I have to mute to cough, but it is what it is, right? Okay, so I'm not going to read the entire agenda slide. We're going to go through a real kind of basic introductory around why automation is important. There's a lot of misconceptions around automation as well. So I want to talk about what those are so that you feel comfortable about what you're doing, okay? And then we're going to get right into it. Today is a lab-driven course, and we're gonna build stuff, okay? Okay, so in order to follow this course, I recommend that you have the following. 1, Incentral. Okay, so if you're an RMM partner, there's a whole other boot camp next week. But if you want, you can always follow along as well. So access to Incentral, ideally with admin credentials, because you need to be able to access Automation Manager. 1 would be a test device. You want to run and test automation. We're going to talk more about best practices around testing and the lab manual for this course. So if you look to the GoToWebinar, there is a handout section where you can download the PDF that we're going to walk through today. Now, there are 10 labs. We're going to do about 4 today and about 6 tomorrow. Maybe it's 5 today, and I can't remember. We might have split it in half, but we're going to do some labs today and then obviously some labs tomorrow. Okay, so let me just do a quick demo here. Normally I have Incentral up and running, but just in case you don't, let me just find my phone. I got to get my trusty 2FA code. Okay, so 105493. Oop, 3. There we go. And I'm going to come down to enable. Now, at the SO level, you're going to traverse the left-hand menu, and you're going to come down to the actions menu where it says Start Automation Manager. Now, I'm going to launch this from Incentral. Okay, so I choose Application and I open Link, UAC prompt, and then it will launch here. Now, if launched correctly from Incentral, you should have a few things. You will have things like open policy from Incentral. These are all of the pre-canned, or at least the automation that has been uploaded to Incentral. You will have things like, if I create a new policy here, you will have a upload button. That is if you have successfully linked from Automation Manager. Now, if you haven't, no big deal. Oftentimes, I still run automation locally from my machine with no connection to N-central, because I like to save my stuff to my OneDrive and be able to share that with partners or what have you. But oftentimes it is advantageous to be able just to upload to N-central and have it there for once you're done and do your testing. Okay, so that is launching into Automation Manager. Now, if I come back, what we're going to do here is we're going to give you 5 minutes to do the exact same thing. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask any questions using the questions pane. Okay, so go ahead and do that. And I'll start a little clock. So Mike has a question. He says, when I click open policy from N-central, it says no policies found. Is that correct? It would be if you have no policies pre-configured in your N-central server. So that is probably what the issue is there. Okay, Mike? So we'll talk a little bit more about kind of best practices and how to handle automation, naming conventions, testing, that kind of stuff as we go through. Okay, so you probably didn't need the full 5 minutes to probably launch into Automation Manager, but always gives me an opportunity to see if anybody has an issue or they don't have admin access or one of those things. Okay, so let me get rid of this clock and we'll move right along here. Okay, so we're going to do a complete kind of overview of Automation Manager here. Let me just pull it back up. So a little lay of the land, all right? So from the top, you can see there is a file menu, right? Where you can, start a new policy, open. Again, if you have the link to N-central, you will be able to browse N-central. This is my lab where I do some testing. Okay, so I can come in and obviously click save as, run, etc. Okay, so a few things. You can move these little panes around. We introduced that earlier, I would say late last year, where you can move these panes around, bring them down to the bottom and dock them in certain ways. So if you see the little tile in the middle here, right there, you can now move them around any which way you want. Now, oftentimes when I do stuff like that, what happens is I don't like my layout, so I'll come back and I'll go back to view and then restore default layout, and then I'll put it right back to the way it was. Okay, so a little, to revert back to normal if you want. Oftentimes, if I'm building automation, I'll just, get rid of the help, and then if I need the help on a particular object, it will maybe help me kind of figure out what the, the parameters around the object are, which is a good segue. So if we come into something like, does file exist? Okay, well, this one's pretty straightforward. But if I come back to that help file, every object has a little bit of information, what the input parameters are, what the output parameters would be, right? So, if I put something like C:\temp and I click run, okay, you can see here that I ran this does file exist on C:\temp, and it says yes, true. The result is 0. So 0 is true in Automation Manager and tells me the policy has completed successfully. All right. Now, if I went and ran, let's try this. It's still true. I still have 5 files everywhere. So if it didn't work, it would say false and would give me a 1. All right. Now, let me just right click on that blue bar, and now I can delete. Now you're going to see that automation is simply just a drag and drop interface, right? So if I want to check if user logged on, okay, now I can put a couple wildcards in here, whatever the domain is, whatever the username. I'm just checking to see if they're logged in. And then from there, I can click play. And again, I'm able to see that I'm logged in. From there, I can do stuff with this, right? So based on the result or the output, I'm able to now create logic and do things effectively so that you're able to accomplish the tasks that you want. So in N-central, there are called conditionals and control flow, right? Conditionals allow me to do some very, very cool stuff, like, checks. Is user logged in? Is that file there? Does local user exist? Is the administrator, whatever, right? And then from there, I can now split the logic using control flow. So I can go if, or my favorite here is if else. So if user is logged in, then do this, else do that. So you're now splitting the workflow because, for example, if user is logged in, I'm going to prompt them. If they're not, maybe I'm going to clean the recycle bin, whatever. I'm sure I could come up with a better use case than that, but that is what I'm getting at. Do one thing, and then based on this, if they're not logged in, maybe do something else. Okay, so that's a quick little tutorial on how to use Automation Manager. If you haven't, remember, for every single object that you throw in, let me just add that in, there is help, right? So always look to the help file if you're confused and you're trying to fill it out and you're still getting a little bang here that says, hey, I need some inputs. It is important to go through and understand. Now, there is a lot of power to this, stop policy, switch, wait, right? If you're running an install task, there might be something that you need to do to wait until that task is completed and then run a command line parameter to update the license file or something like that. Okay, so again, always look to your testing. And when you do testing, I use my laptop for testing all the time. I haven't broken it this year, thankfully. Just give me 1 second here. But I have come in and broken my device. So it's always good to have a lab device in your N-central where you can run automation policies against. Okay. Now there is a fail policy object here as well. Typically that is used for RMM. RMM does automation very differently than N-central. N-central is really good about outputting, values. Whereas in automation, or I should say in our RMM product, you have to tell it to do things. You have to fail the check if user isn't logged in, for example. Okay, a little different. Okay, so there's that. And then you can do, the hardest thing about Automation Manager, I'll be honest with you, is knowing that there's 600, I don't think there's 600, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a ton of objects. Now, you have to remember that this is a no-code automation engine. And that's really important to an MSP, right? Mike, Start Automation Manager won't work on a Mac. Not yet, no. We're hoping I would say by the end of this year, we should have something for Mac on automation. We're not there yet. A lot of the times, you're gonna have to, spin up, a VM in Windows just to do your automation, okay? Now, as you go through, like I was saying, the hardest thing about this is understanding how much automation is in here. I would say 98, I'll say 95%. 95% of the objects in here are all based in PowerShell. They're hard-coded with PowerShell. I can't share the code. It's all proprietary. We have developers who build all of this stuff for us. But what it does is bring your MSP ease of use around automation. Again, drag and drop. Fill it out. C : / type it right, C : / program files, x86, whatever, and then give it some command line parameters. You want it to run hidden, /s, /qn, whatever it may be. Again, when you're trying to install programs, go to the vendor and they'll have documentation on how to install their executable or MSI package or what have you via command line. Okay, so that's a quick little tutorial on Automation Manager. Again, the benefit to your MSP is you don't need to know how to code in order to build automation. Now, if you do know how to code, okay, so I'd like to call this no code or low code, right? So if I want to do, we have a run PowerShell script, right? Where you can edit and input your PowerShell. So if you grab some PowerShell off the internet, you can insert it here and run that against your device. Or you can simply go to Incentral and run it right from Incentral if you wanted to. But again, this is what we call a wrapper for PowerShell, because then what you're going to do is upload to Incentral as a container, and you're going to be able to run that whenever you feel like, without having to type in the one-liner, or other techs are going to be able to use it too. That is the benefit of being able to use low-code automation. And then what we have is pro code. So if you had a big comprehensive script and you wanted to paste that in here, you can also include things like input parameters and output parameters, and then create what we call custom monitoring. Now, I just gave that boot camp, I think 2 weeks ago. So I show people how to use the PowerShell script to do some complex stuff, where you can do inputs and outputs. As long as you have that output, you basically have custom monitoring, right? Based on the result that it's returning back. Is that service started? Yes or no? Or, you're trying to reset print spooler, and did it fail? Look, there's a lot of great use cases for using this particular object. And I would have to say that out of everything that is in Automation Manager, it's probably the most widely used one. If you go on the internet and see a script, I'll give you a prime example. I wrote a little tiny script called HDD versus SSD, because my boss at the time was like, we need sales, we need opportunities, figure out how I'm going to sell more. Okay, cool. So I started using, Automation Manager for reporting, right? Not just, we call it reporting, but it was custom monitoring. I went through and added custom monitoring to every single workstation and laptop in my Incentral, and that was 18,000 devices at the time, because I wanted to see who was using an HDD versus an SSD. And it's funny because we correlated some information behind the scenes based on that. One, we created sales opportunities. So when customers are saying, hey, my laptop's slow or my workstation's slow, oh, hey, here's our project. What we're going to do is we're going to upgrade your hard drives. We're going to charge you 2 hours, blah, 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 right? The other part is it gave us our service desk a lot of intel as well, because we started seeing the same repeat offenders from our customer base who was complaining about how slow their computers were, how many more tickets they were logging, right? Essentially decreasing our profitability. So it was a really good way to kind of evergreen, as I called it, evergreen, and create a project around that. And again, that's just a simple example. It could be anything, right? When it comes to hardware, right? Or operating system, right? Around that time, we still had some customers with legacy SBS servers, right? So, just fact finding on those, and understanding who's still using an SBS, and either migrating them to our private cloud or a public cloud, or et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let's get on with it here. Let me come back to my slides. Okay, so review of Automation Manager. So why are you here today? Okay, one, I want to show you the value of automation. I've been teaching automation now for, I would say, probably since 2015, 16, when I was a sales engineer. So back in those days, what would happen, just give me 1 second, please. Okay, so again, the bootcamp today is mostly around to show you the value of automation. When I was teaching automation back in the day, the first thing techs would ask me is like, why am I gonna wanna learn this? It's gonna put me out of a job. No, it's not. That was a big concern a long, long time ago. Let's just say things have gotten even more complex. We're not just dealing with physical laptops and workstations and physical servers or virtual servers anymore. We're dealing with things like AWS or Azure or SD-WAN. Things are even more complex than they were 6, 7 years ago. There's a real important use case for you as a tech to go in and use automation and understand automation. It's to your benefit, not just the MSPs that you're working for, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go through. Okay, to show you how to get started with Automation Manager, and I think I did that just a little bit earlier, to walk you through creating your first policy today. If you haven't created a policy, we're going to walk through that. To impart best practices around automation, and to help you be a better and more efficient MSP and tech. Let's be honest, if you're in your 20s, you're probably not going to spend the next 20 years at the same MSP, right? You might move on to another IT department. You might move on to X, Y, or Z, but you're going to understand how to use automation because it is that important, especially to your career. Okay, and we're going to talk about that now. Why do MSPs automate IT? Okay. Now, one, to the business, it's going to increase profitability, right? One, like I was saying, SSD versus HDD, you're going to be able to find sales opportunities, which obviously are going to increase your profitability. The other part of that is that if you're always reacting to problems, then what happens is you're now selling proactive services, but reacting to those problems, and not really a proactive business. So what you're trying to do is automate, and I always talk about starting with the mundane, right? Start with the stuff that is really simple. Service restarts. You have anybody with running QuickBooks anymore? Like QuickBooks Desktop? That's one I used to focus on. Improve efficiency. Take the human element out, right? Which is number 3. But what you're going to do here with automation is now standardize. You're going to be able to run maintenance across your workstations and laptops and servers, et cetera, et cetera. Reduce the human factor. Now, who wants to do the same garbage day in, day out? You know, you talk to the same user with the same problem. My computer is slow. I'm having a problem with X, Y, or Z. You can stop that from happening using automation. Ensure that the boring work gets done, right? Now, when I've been, okay, so I started off as a sysadmin, 2001, I think. So, which just goes to show how old I am. But been doing this a long time, and I used to have to look through log files. You'd be like, what? Look through log files? Who does that anymore? Nobody. You know, MSPs are busy enough. Nobody gets the opportunity to look through log files, but I used to, manually. Part of my job was to look through server logs and fix problems that way, right? So you don't have to do that anymore, right? You can ensure that maintenance and understanding where your problems are get done immediately. You know, once a day, once a week, once a month, whatever you think that frequency should look like. And again, you're going to standardize your service delivery, right? Because if you have proactive customers, you're going to run automation against those customers and keep them up and running and healthy, at least healthier. The other part is you're not running automation on your reactive customers, the ones that are paying you time and materials, the ones that you're charging an hourly rate, right? Not projects. Projects are different. You're going to charge an hourly rate for projects, but we are talking about your day-to-day maintenance and support in a proactive model, right? You need to standardize that service delivery. You're going to map to and deliver on your service programs and SLAs, right? So for example, if C drive has a threshold of 80%, so if it breaches 80%, that is what you call a warning or a fail, then do something, right? Self-healing. Deliver a high level of service to your customer. As you grow automation, I can tell you right now, the best MSPs on the planet, I get to talk to all of them, and there are some really impressive MSPs out there that are doing some very, very cool stuff, especially with automation, right? So it can be game changing to the MSP business. Now, I should have asked in my polls, like, do we have any business owners? Are you a tech? Blah, blah, blah. Because if you are a service delivery manager, say you're a tech today, maybe you're going to be the service delivery manager in 2 years. Understand that when you increase your prowess around automation, you're going to impact the bottom line of your MSP, but also the quality of your service to your customer. All right. Why should you automate? Okay. One, you're going to be a more valuable employee, right? That's what we want. I mean, when I get out of the bed every morning and I go to work, I know I'm going to get paid, right, for the job I do. Now, over my 20-year career, I started off as an L1 tech in a call center answering the phones. I clawed my way up into an L2 position. Back then it was called mentor position. So basically I had 20 techs that I would help with, escalations and, technical issues and those kinds of things. And then I went into my first sysadmin job, right, where I was running basically 200 servers for a call center, all physical, no virtual, Windows NT in 2000, right? No real automation back in those days. Now, with automation comes seniority, because you're now going to be the script guy. You're going to be the problem solver, right? So one, you're going to be more valuable. And then, number three here, you're going to help your company, right? The MSP business is highly competitive. It depends on your market. Not all cities or towns are highly competitive. You might be the only MSP in your city, if you're lucky. But what you're going to be able to do is differentiate your MSP from the guy down the street, or the tech who's charging 17 bucks an hour, right, for reactive services. Automation occurs throughout the journey. Now, people ask me all the time, yeah, I've got people who can, write PowerShell. I've got people who know Automation Manager, but I don't feel like we're, mature enough to build automation, right? So the question I always get asked is, how do we start? I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through, but there are certain things you want to do to focus on when you're automating, right? Now, I'm not going to go through all of this. It's a pretty wordy slide, but you have assess, onboard, monitor, manage, optimize, and report, right? Those are basically RMM basics, right? Whenever you bring on a new customer, you're going to assess, you're going to onboard, you're going to monitor them, manage them, hopefully optimize them, and then report on it, right? So you can show your value. So as you go through here, you have to, figure out, where are we going to optimize that customer? Once you bring them on, you understand that they're a financial company, they've got, an X ERP solution, they've got, 40 employees, XXX. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to figure out, how can we make this customer more efficient using automation, right? Now, there are certain things you're going to want to do using things like tickets and figuring it all out. And we'll talk about that as we go through, but this is how you get started. Okay, so give me one sec. Identifying use cases for automation. You have to break up automation into, right on the screen, it's 3 things. There's another one that I don't really get into or talk about too much, and that's more of the reporting stuff. You can actually pull information from your RMM, for example, or from other systems, API reporting. Historically, this channel has been riddled with bad reporting. So, and there's some good tools out there for reporting, but oftentimes you can actually glean information from things like PowerShell, right? But for what I'm going to go through today is self-healing, reactive, and proactive. And those are 3 important buckets when you're trying to figure out what you're doing for your customers. 1, when I have a problem, do I want to fix it as soon as there is a problem? Self-healing. Proactive. What I'm going to do is now run scripting or automation, and periodically throughout the day, the week, the month, to keep those devices up and running, right? Being more proactive. Reactive automation. Do I have an onslaught of fixes of automation that I can now apply to my customer whenever they call me, or whenever I have a server issue, right? Exchange back pressure. And hey, I'm old, so I used to deal with a lot of Exchange back in the day. You never have to deal with Exchange anymore, probably, hopefully. So it's one of those things where I always had Exchange scripting. I would say back in the 2008, 2009, I used to be able to write VBS. I'm a little rusty at it now, but it's one of those things where VBS, right? I could write that and then have that as part of my arsenal of fixes, right? And again, I would share those with the other 3 or 4 techs that I managed. Now, I'm not going to go through, Marc-Andre loves this kind of stuff. He likes workflow, right? How does self-healing work in N-central? Okay, skip this slide. It's not that important. Just know that you can tie self-healing to any piece of monitoring in N-central, right? Now, based on the monitoring, if you're able to monitor it, you can also self-heal on it, okay? So again, can it be monitored? Yes, it can. Okay, there's a whole other workflow. Not monitored yet? Well, create some custom monitoring, right? That is the differentiator, especially in N-central, right? You're going to be able to do those custom monitoring or those pieces of automation or self-healing very, very easily. I'm going to go through self-healing just a little bit. Self-healing use cases, okay? I always use disk. It's a perfect use case, right? End user, copies their cat photos, they max their OneDrive. What can you do to fix it? Okay. You may not be able to, figure out exactly that they've stuffed, 2 or 5 gigs of photos into their My Docs, but it's one of those things where if the disk fills up, you can attempt to clean it up. And again, the various areas of a disk where people store stuff: desktop, My Docs, well, Docs and OneDrive. Depends on if you're doing any folder redirection, that kind of stuff. But service restarts, again, perfect for servers, in my opinion. I used to look after a car dealership, a car dealership consortium. They had dealerships all over our province here in Ontario. And it was one of those things where they were using QuickBooks and QuickBooks on-premise desktop, and every single day of the week, I'm talking every day, there was a problem, right? So I created some automation around that. And some of it was pretty simple. Unapproved process runs. Again, if somebody's running torrent software, you can nix that executable from running. Okay, so let's get into a use case. I'm going to pull this up and go new. Now, before I do that, let me pull up my manual. It's somewhere in here. Here we are. Move the questions pane over here. Okay, so first things first, we're going to call this lab 1, healing maintenance. Hopefully I spelled that right. Copy. Actually, I'm going to put April, just in case I had it in my system previously. So the first thing I'm going to do here is pull in what is a prompt. Okay. There's 2 types of prompts. Actually, there's 4. But the ones I use most common are prompt and input prompt. But I'm going to type in, hello, dear employee, I need to do some maintenance on your PC. Is that okay? Couldn't take much more than a few minutes. Now, pardon any typos or grammatical errors. I'm famous for that. So, and again, I want this actually down here. And I'll call this just prompt. Okay. Then I'm going to put in some time. I'm going to give them, let's say 900 seconds. Okay. So it is in seconds, and obviously you can convert 60 seconds into a minute and a minute into whatever duration you want. I'm going to give them a couple buttons, right? You say yes or no, okay? Or it could be something like okay, cancel, or whatever you want, right? So I'll just do yes or no. And then from there, I'm going to split my logic. Okay, like earlier, I'm going to look for my if else. Now, what I'm going to do, and I intentionally didn't tell you about the links to the right-hand side as I was going through because now's that time. Okay, so what I want to do here is based on those button responses of yes or no, I want to do then or else, right? So what happens when they click yes? Okay, so I'm going to link the output of this object, this script, into the next phase, right? So I'm going to click here. I'm going to click prompt. Now there's three things it's going to, give me in terms of an output. Click result, a result string, like a result value, or just the result. For this purpose, I want the click result. Now, if that click result equals yes, or say no, we'll do yes. Then what I want to do are some things, right? Now, we're talking about maintenance. So what do I want to do if they click yes? I want to run clean manager, right? So there's all these things that you can do to clean up your system, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to click them all, but you can see them. They're all here, right? We have other ones like delete. You can delete things like, where are you, temp files, you're somewhere here. Delete temp, right? You can drag that. Again, when you're dragging things over and it's at the bottom of the screen, you can wiggle down and pull it down or go back up. I'm still holding the cursor and then I can drag it right in here. Now, if they're not logged in, right? So if I'm prompting and they're not there, right? And so they're after 900 seconds, this disappears. I'm not able to do any maintenance because you're basically asking them for permission, right? This could, and again, a really important use case around, now this is self-healing maintenance, but you could also do this with reboots, right? Like, hey, your device has now been up for 21 days. Yeah, we need to reboot your device. I'm going to give you 3 hours, something like that. Okay. Now, if they're not logged in, maybe I just want to log a message. Now, this is for your benefit because now maybe the user has declined device maintenance or user has not accepted our daily maintenance package, whatever you want to call it, right? So it can be whatever you want, something simple. But you can see the power here, right? You're deleting all of the garbage. Now, do you have to run this daily? Probably not, right? I typically with laptop and workstations, it's a once a week type of thing. With servers, typically once a month. But with servers, obviously we don't need a prompt, right? We can just go ahead and do it. All right, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna build this one together. So what you're gonna do here is I'm gonna give you 10 minutes and I'm going to give you the opportunity to build this one yourself. Now, what you're gonna do is look to what page is it? Page 3, I think we're on. Lab 1, self-healing maintenance. So go ahead and build this. Let me just move this questions pane out of the way. Sorry about that. I thought that was my timer. There we go. Now we got the timer. Okay, so we're gonna do 10 minutes. Save and play. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to ask as we go through. Okay, and we're back here. All right, so that is lab 1. There are some optional steps as well, so we'll go through that right now. Okay, let me just pull this up. So now that I have this automation built the way I want, obviously it's always good to test, right? Now what I can do is I can just click the upload button. Okay, so the policy's been uploaded. Now, because I already test on my device, I can go ahead and click run directly through automation. It's going to then hopefully prompt up. There we go. Here's the prompt, blah, blah, blah. Now, I could say yes and go through all of this maintenance, but I'm going to say no. Just give me 1 second, please. Sorry about that. Just trying to get my daughter off to school here. Okay, so I click no. it stops the maintenance, but if I was to click yes, it would go through and do all the things that I wanted it to. So again, really easy to be able to take your policy, either upload it to N-central or just run it locally on your machine. Now again, if you wanted to, and I'll start new here, browse, I could find this policy somewhere in here, lab 1. There it is, right? So I could even, log into another machine, launch Automation Manager, and do it somewhere else if I want to. Okay. So those are several different ways to be able to do your testing. Now, when it comes to testing, I do recommend that you test, because just because you test on one Windows 10 machine doesn't mean you're going to get the same result on maybe a different build, right? So I always recommend starting small, right? Few PCs, run your automation, make sure that your customer is socialized to understand that you're going to give them prompts. I mean, sometimes that can wig them out a little bit as well. So you might want to send them an email, let them know that if they see any messages, to click yes and complete the maintenance or something like that. All right, so let's go on to lab 2. Okay. Now, there are outputs, and you saw that in Automation Manager when I went through that is a status window where it tells us exactly what is going on, right? Do they click yes? Do they click no? Et cetera, et cetera. It tells you exactly what is happening, right? And again, if you need to find where this is, you want to go to Views, Job Status. I want to filter on Automation Policy. And then I can see all of the automation policy that I'm running against my devices. There's server maintenance. And then I can see what was happening, right? Now, this is probably a poor use case because this policy probably isn't doing much of anything. But in your system, you might see a whole whack of information. Okay, so that's where you can find the automation that you're running across your devices. Maybe you need to tweak when you're doing it, right? You're going to make it reoccur every 4 hours or something like that. And again, you can also, through that interface, I'm not going to go too much into this, is you can download the zip file and look at it. N-central will only show you so much, so it will truncate some of the output. So if you have a really, really big policy, you may actually have to download it into a text file. Okay. Now, there are other use cases for proactive maintenance. For example, if you're managing SQL servers, right? You can back up the database, you can check logs, you can grab logs. Antiviruses or EDR solutions have logs. You can get a lot of information from this, right? What else here? Snapshots, tons of stuff. You have VMware. You can use automation on VMware to proactively create some maintenance, okay? Now, when you do your proactive maintenance, you start your review. Like, what are you going to do? Do you have a checklist? I typically write it down, right? If you don't write it down, it doesn't exist. So write down what your checklist would be. Review your checklist and then identify what you can and potentially cannot do, right? You might need a PowerShell script to throw into your automation policy as well, right? And again, look to see if there are ones on the cookbook, right? And we'll go into the cookbook as we go through, okay? Now, when it comes to proactive maintenance, again, you can restart a process after a reboot, monitor a recent reboot and auto trigger the automation, event log errors and warning spikes. Again, you can pull all that information directly into a log file, and then if you want, parse it. Patching and patch approvals, right? Auto approve all critical and security patches only. Now, would I do that with Automation Manager? Probably not. We have a pretty cool patch manager that can do a lot of that, but I just want to kind of give you that use case as well. Okay, All right, so proactive maintenance, restarting a service after a reboot. All right, so let's go down to lab 2. All right, so let me find my trusty automation manager. I'm going to click new. Okay, actually, I do want to save that. Hold on, let me just save this really quick. Where are you? OneDrive, nerd stuff, automation. Okay, we'll put it in labs. There we go, save. Now we'll start new, and we'll call this lab 2, proactive maintenance. There we go. Oh, April, just in case I've done this boot camp several times, so oftentimes it's already there. Now, what we're going to do here is let's just back out of this entirely. We're going to look to see if a service is running. Is service, spell it right. Is service running? Drop that in there. What we're going to do is so a little bit about the linking. So say I want to reuse this for other things, right? I could call this service name. It has to be one word, service name. What is the service name? And I can leave the value blank, right? Now I can now link it. And this is important because when you upload this to N-central, it will prompt you for the service name. Now, in this example, we're going to hard code print spooler. So let me just delete all of this. Print spooler. And then what I'm going to do is my if statement, not an if else, just an if. Okay. Because there's no if or then, right? It's just going to be, you know, is print spooler running? Then do something, right? So we're going to link this, right? Is the service running? Conditional equals, and again, in the example, it's going to be true. Then what we're going to do here, let me just pull this down. Then what we're going to do is service, again, service running. We're going to call it Windows time. Now, if Windows time, see, and there's another really good use case is that if you start using the multiple of the same objects, it is advantageous to edit them and give them their own name. Print spooler, like that. And in this one, time. Okay. Now, when I want to link them, I know exactly which one is which. Now, chronologically, it will put the first, you know, you don't have to do this. You've only got 2 of them. You know what print spoolers at the top and Windows times at the bottom. But I've seen it where I've had 4 or 5 of these and it gets a little confusing. So it's always good as a best practice to kind of give them some more information. So again, Windows time. And again, that is going to be time conditional. Okay. And that string is going to be does not equal to true. So if Windows time is not running, not equal to true, then let me go down. Then what we're going to do is start a service. Start service. And we're going to call this spooler. Okay. You don't have to select the value if the startup type, right? I don't need to turn that on, just uncheck it. And I also want to start so Windows time, if disabled, automatic, print spooler, just leave it. what we're going to do is we're going to wait. Sure, you've restarted services before. They do take a little bit, right? So you can give it something like 30, 45 seconds if you want. And then what you're going to do is do a check. Is service running? Right? And we're going to put that right below here, not at the very bottom one, right? Not here, not here, right below the wait. Okay. And again, we're going to check on print spooler. And that's it. So I'm not going to run this right now. Let me keep on going here. So if print spooler, start service print spooler, wait, is service running? Okay. Again, I can type in here, print spooler 2. Again, fat fingered that, there we go. Then what we're going to do here is start service. And wait 30 seconds. Here, I think I pretty much messed this up. Give me 1 second here. Let's go to the then. I want to make sure I'm on track here. Then service running. Okay, so that's right. Wait 30 seconds. No, no wait here. That's what I did wrong. Okay, and then we want another if statement. If, we want that right here. Link. If I want this conditional equals, does not equal true, then what you can do is fail that policy. Now you can use the fail policy in N-central as well, basically to record that if something is still broken, at least you know that you've failed the policy. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and build this one together. Pardon me. So I'm going to give you 15 minutes to do this one. I close my clock. Give me 1 sec. Clock. On 5. Save. Go ahead and do that lab. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Mike has a brilliant question, and I get this one all of the time. So let me just read it. It says, hi, great stuff so far. I have a quick question. Is automation the go-to way if I want to install a bunch of programs on a new device if I install the N-central agent on it? So what you're basically describing is like an onboarding automation, right? So think of it like this. You onboard a new customer and your MSP has a bunch of tools and stuff they typically are going to install outside of just the N-central agent, right? It could be, well, we're going to install like take control, the ecosystem agent, PME all automatically, but there are some additional stuff that you're probably going to want to install because you might not be using everything from Enable. You might use Cisco Umbrella, you might use Tray Icons, you might be using a bunch of security platforms outside of just what we have at Enable. Here, let me just get rid of this. So it's just one of those things where you may also want to standardize on certain common off-the-shelf or what we call COTS software, VLC player, WinRAR, WinZip, various other stuff. And I can tell you that is actually a lab on Thursday's bootcamp. So that is what I call or deem part of my advanced automation. It's not overly complex, but there's some various things that you have to do. And I show you how to use Chocolatey to do some of the stuff. So Mike, I'm hoping that you'll see me on Thursday morning and we'll go through it then. All right, so break's over. Hopefully you guys can hear me. So break's over, reactive automation. Now I do go through this workflow because I find reactive automation probably the one that, you know, when you set up proactive automation or self-healing, they're kind of very, well, I won't call them easy, but there's usually a good use case, right? There's a use case and you're going, oh, hey, I've got a server maintenance, or hey, there's some proactive things that I want to do, you know, set up the automation that way, or yeah, I've got a good use case for self-healing, right? It's very kind of turnkey. Whereas with reactive, sometimes you build something and it might just sit in your central server for something to maybe happen again 2 weeks, a month, you never know, right? So how do you build in reactive automation? Well, without me going through this slide first, what I used to do is so when I worked for an MSP, we had ConnectWise managed, and we had probably 8 different service boards, believe it or not. We were a really big business, so we would segment our service boards a certain way. Long story short is, I finally built a NOC team, and I would say to my team, I'd be like, okay, so I want you guys to report on these tickets and tell me what automation we can do. So a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, I get nothing, right? So I get nothing back from the team because they don't know. Nothing kind of jumps out at you to say, hey, automate me, until I built an automate me button. So in ConnectWise, you can actually create additional fields, not a free-form text field, but simply just like a radio button or a checkbox. So every time the service team found like there was a repeat issue or a good, something that was more mundane, that's how we started. I put an automate me button in ConnectWise, and the text would simply go, yeah, this is stupid. Let's just automate this. This is easy, right? That's how we started with reactive automation. Like, hey, QuickBooks, I use QuickBooks as my go-to example, only because I struggled with almost losing a customer because of QuickBooks. Again, the finance team was really pissed off. They were calling me every day. I was the director of managed services at the time. I'm like, okay, I'll put our heads together and we'll solve this. We're on the phone with QuickBooks. Like, I'm telling you, every day it was that problematic. And all we had to do was build in some automation. Now, the pains never went away entirely, but I can tell you what were daily occurrences became bi-weekly, right? Like, really reduce the amount of CSAT, the amount of frustration on their side, right? So huge stuff around reactive automation. So report on users with the most tickets. That's another big one, right? Report on repeat issues, another big one, right? So you're going to be able to report on this stuff from your PSA, your ticketing solution, MSP manager, whatever you're using. Search, review, identify common causes for those tickets, repeating tickets, different problems with common root cause, service restarts. Sort by the total time spent on those tickets to identify issues that cost the most time on a regular basis. Again, I had a large customer that was paying me well over $10,000 a month, and their finance team, which was the one cutting us the check, was probably the most angry. So you could see why I focused on them. They were one of our highest revenue generators. Select the top issues for that time period based on filtering, searching, and pick them one by one. Again, ask yourself, can it be scripted? Not everything can be fixed and scripted, by the way. Well, most things, I wouldn't say all things. No, review the next ticket, move on. Yes, look for or create a new automation task. Again, Google foo. There is so much on the internet. You throw in a GitHub. People put stuff online all the time. Stack Exchange. There's so much on the internet already that you could make your own. Okay, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel either. Okay, 1 second. I'm gonna cough here. So What I didn't tell you is that I got COVID 2 weeks ago. I spent 2 years not getting COVID, and all of a sudden I get COVID because I go into the office for 3 days. So I end up getting COVID, and I've been fighting this lingering cough for a couple of weeks now. So I do apologize if I have to keep on going on mute. Anyways, reactive automation. Customer calls about locked out account. Create a script that the tech can run and unlock. Right? Customer calls about the inability to print while others still can. Create a script to restart print spooler. Monthly cleanup of SQL, right? That's a little more involved, but if you're a NOC person and an L2, someone who's dealing with systems, this is where you can automate the folder backup and automatically run the script to clean up when needed. Alternatively, run a script periodically, right? It doesn't have to be every day. Okay, so reactive cleanup files older than X. Okay, so we're going to do lab 3. Now this is a big one, and while we took a break and while we did lab 2, I decided to go ahead and build this one because it would take me probably 15 or 20 minutes to do it. So give me 1 sec and I'll pull it over. I'm going to walk you through it. I'm just not going to do all the drag and drop because it's really wide and really expansive. So first things first, you're going to create 3 inputs. Now I want you to look to the naming convention: in folder path, in file mask, in files to keep. Now you're probably wondering why all of the in, because this is an input. As well, when you do outputs, not that there are any outputs here, but a good best practice is to label your inputs and outputs. That way you can track them. And it's very important because when you start doing custom monitoring and you have inputs and you have outputs and you have global variables and you have in script, by the way, if there was a PowerShell object, we call that INSC, right? In script, out script, right? So you can be able to track these, and it's a lot less confusing just by using those naming conventions, right? For this intent and purpose, we're going to create 3. Okay, so in folder path, folder where files need to be cleaned up. Okay, and in mine, I don't know if I have a C: template. Let me just look at my directory here. Do I have a backup folder? We're going to find out. C temp. Here, we'll change this to, okay, is that right? Yeah, here, let's lowercase, event logs. Okay, I do have that. So we're gonna change mine to C: event logs because I have nothing in backup. In file mask for the files. So for example, you could do wildcards, there could be backup files in here. In mine, for example, what's a file format in here? Let's see, I think it's probably just log. It's EVT, right? So I could even do something like star dot, your backspace, EVT. Okay, those are event logs. And here, I'll just show you what they look like in my event log folder. There we go. So here are my event logs, right? And I back them up, right? So temp, event logs, right? And these are all EVT logs, all right? So again, I can just use wildcards. I can do the actual extension, all right? Cancel. Files to keep, 10, right? Now think of it like this, and this is the use case, is that if you are using something like Robocopy or you're backing up files locally, and it's one of those things where maybe you don't want to back, and especially if you're backing up in Central, you're probably FTPing our database files to a directory. This would be a great use case to maybe keep the last 15, right? But for this purpose, we're going to keep 10, okay? So number of most recent files to keep, 10. Then we're going to drag and drop, folder exists. Now what we're going to do is link, sorry, let me move this over. Where does that folder exist? This is the folder where files are to be cleaned up. Then we're going to drag an if-else statement. Now I'm going to close the help file, give it a little more room. So as you can see here, if else, I'm going to drag that in and then it's going to present me this. Folder exists. Again, I'm going to link conditional equals true. Then I'm going to drag in folder file count. Okay, so I'm going to drag that in, and I'm going to link where the files are going to be cleaned up. And again, the file mask that I want files to be deleted, right? The type of files, backup, BCK, EBT, whatever it's going to be. Then I'm going to drag in another if else. And this is where we're going to, as you're going to see, we're splitting the logic from the top level here because there's another else here, right? So again, if we're looking for that and this is false, hey, there's only 9 files in there. Well, I don't have to do anything. Folder does not exist, no action. There's only 9 files, whatever it might be. Okay, a simple log. Else, what I'm then going to do is a math operation. Now, this is where scripting can get a little complex because what we want to do is enumerate, I should say, certain numbers within the file, within the output, because we gotta have it in a particular format, right? So as we're coming through, the input parameter, most recent files to keep, number greater than 10. Then we're going to link in that file folder count and subtract that from the most recent files to keep, right? So that's the delta change. Find the top oldest files, because we're not going to just randomly delete the top 10. We want to find the oldest ones. So based on like last modified date, right? So we're going to link in the area where files are to be cleaned up. We're going to filter on that file mask. And then we're going to link in the number from here into here. Math, number result. Okay. I hope that part makes sense. It can get a little confusing. As you build this, you'll understand it. It's really important because as you're doing the math operation, you also now want to link what is behind here. We call it an output. So based on that subtraction operation, carry that forward into here. And then what we're going to do is a for each loop. And if you're not familiar with PowerShell or scripting, a for each is really a way to loop through a list of information. Like, for example, a directory. We're going to for each list through those top oldest files in that list and delete the file in that for each loop that is the math number result of the oldest file in that list. I know it can get a little confusing. I'm trying to break it down into English as basic as I can, but it's really important to understand this particular operation and take your time. I'm going to give you 15 minutes to go through this, but this piece is hugely important. And if you can understand how to build this piece, you're going to be able to use math in oldest files and this looping mechanism in a lot of other use cases, because you're going to use directories. You're going to want to look for things, C:\\. Now, I will tell you, PowerShell can be a little resource intensive. So you want to be very careful with for each loops across an entire C drive. You can do it. Like for example, when log4j happened, hey, we had to look to see if there was a bunch of log4j files. However, it is a little more resource intensive, okay? And again, once we find that directory, we're going to parse through those oldest files and delete any files older than X, okay? And then you've got a log message if it doesn't meet the criteria from the top, and also log, not enough files to delete, right? So a great comprehensive automation policy that you could probably even use today. So what we're going to do is build that. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. Austin has a great question, and I probably just didn't explain it well enough. So his question is, why in the file mask input parameter is the value star dot star? So in typical, and it depends on how long you've been doing systems, but if you want to look for, if you go to a search, like in Windows, right? So if you go to File Explorer or Windows Explorer, and you go into the search criteria, you may want to look through all files. And how to do that is really a file mask, like whatever the name is, which is the wildcard, the first star, and then dot extension is the dot, and then whatever the extension may be, right, which is the next wildcard. So it's star dot star, right? That is just it doesn't matter what the extension is in that folder, is that this policy is going to look through the oldest files and delete anything that is not the latest 10, if that makes sense. Again, that's why if you want, you don't have to use star dot star. You could use, maybe you have directory full of backup files, PDF files, a bunch of files, JPEGs. Maybe you just want to delete the oldest N JPEGs, right? So you would do .jpg, right, or JPEG, or whatever the file format is in 2022. So it's one of those things where you definitely want to change that. But if regardless of the file format, you want to look through anything, then you want to use that wildcard, which is the parameter star dot star. Hopefully that explains it, Austin. Okay, so I believe this is the last lab. Actually, I'm going to check. It's probably been 3 months since I did this, so it is. Okay, so this is our last lab, and we're actually right on time. So let's go into where do you start? Okay, so what you need to do in terms of revisiting this is look for common tickets from either N-central or from your users who are reporting on things like outages or issues. Check your regular checklist and manual checks. What are you doing manually? What can be automated? The users who log the most tickets, right? Now, we all know who those people are. I've worked at an MSP, so I know I know what that's like. The most frequent help desk ticket or ticket causes. I know not everything can be automated, but a large number of things can.